Rain, a wheelchair gliding past fluorescent lights, a dancer's shoes boxed, spotlight gone dark. Your daughter can't walk, they said. Then a small hand points. He helped me. One ordinary man. One impossible promise? The rain that morning drummed like an accusation against the hospital windows, a steady, cold percussion that seemed to slow the city to a reluctant heartbeat. Gray pooled in gutters, and the corridor lights hummed a tired fluorescent tune as Emily Stanton's wheelchair rolled forward. Each tiny squeal of the wheels sounded like a sentence being closed. She could still remember the roar of an audience, the way lights warmed her skin, the smell of rosin and satin. 6 months ago, she'd been the youngest principal at the New York Academy, a narrow body honed for flight, face that knew the geometry of applause. Now, her toes rested in shoes that never touched the stage again. Her spine, the doctors said, had been betrayed. Paraplegia. One specialist had told Charles Stanton with clinical detachment, irreversible. The word hung in the room like a verdict, but the exception to all diagnoses was loneliness. Emily had learned how people meant brave as a compliment, until brave became a label that muffled her grief. At night, she would press her forehead to the pillow until the faint taste of hospital antiseptic filled her mouth. And she'd cry until the sheets were damp with the salt of things she could not say out loud. Charles Stanton knew how to move mountains. He hired therapists who wore credentials like armor, neurologists with reputations that filled conference halls, even controversial specialists who arrived from distant cities with foreign methods and strange instruments. When money failed, he built a private wing in his mansion with rails, trainers, and a staff that bowed when he entered. Nothing reached the place where Emily had retreated. You can't fix what she's lost with machines, she whispered, once to a nurse who smiled the way. People smile at puzzles they don't intend to solve. You can only hold the parts of her she forgets she owns. So Charles did what billionaires do when everything else has failed. He removed the problem from the problem's environment. He packed Emily into a car, took her away from the city sirens and the well-meaning pity, and drove to a place called Healing Storms, a mountain retreat carved into a gray ridge, where the air tasted like metal and the wind spoke in empty lots of space. The retreat was a curated kind of quiet wooden cabins, a greenhouse that smelled of earth and old sunlight, pine trees like sentinels. The therapists were kind in a manner that checked the boxes of competency. Emily moved through routines the way she once rehearsed choreography, mechanically, without the warmth that used to make even repetition feel like devotion. On the third day, a boy no older than 6 found her. He appeared like a small comet across the gravel path. Freckles smattered across his cheeks, untamed brown hair, and a seriousness in his gaze that made her want to laugh and weep at once. He studied the wheelchair as if it were a new kind of instrument. Then he said simply, "My dad says you're really sad." Emily blinked. She had been reduced to a set of symptoms in a catalog of treatments. No one had ever announced her sadness like someone confirming the weather. "He says some sad people need different help." The boy went on, matter of fact, as if he were reciting rules. "He helped me when my mommy went to heaven." That small phrase landed like a stone in the pond of her careful composure. The boy pointed toward the greenhouse. "That's Adam," he said. "He can help you." Adam Miller was tending a tray of herbs with hands that had long known honest work, calloused, quick, respectful of soil. He wore worn jeans and a navy tee and moved with the calm of someone who had learned to measure progress in seasons rather than in invoices. When he looked up at Emily, his smile didn't have pity in it. It had a soft recognition, the way a man might smile at someone who had once stood under the same sun he once stood under. That night Emily lay awake in the cabin, listening to the rain and thinking of who had the audacity to suggest a stranger could matter. She was used to the ache that lived in her limbs. What she wasn't used to was the ache that wanted something. The next morning, Adam came to her bench with a small, pale flower pinched between 2 fingers. He knelt at the right distance, not intrusive, not clinical, and offered it like an apology for the world. "You don't have to smile," he said. "But maybe this will make today 1% better." His son watched from the path. And Emily, who had once made an audience forget to breathe, found the muscles around her mouth twitch. It was a small thing. It was everything. Adam's story unfolded in small gestures. He'd been a physical therapist at a major hospital before grief pulled him out of the fluorescent world and into the wild. His wife had died suddenly. The grief had been a corridor he could not bear to walk through daily with strangers' faces. He left, moved to the mountains, became the slow heart of a child's life, taught survival skills, coaxed rosemary from stubborn earth. People at Healing Storms knew him as a volunteer who listened more than he spoke, but he had a gift that didn't appear on a resume. He met people as people. He treated the memory of a self, not the list of deficits. Weeks passed with the counterintuitive pace of a seed that takes its time. Emily resisted. She deflected with sarcasm, with silences that shot through the room like cold wind. Once, when Adam suggested a grounding exercise, she snapped, "I don't need lessons in breathing." He only sat on the bench and hummed the tune of No Hurry. "Sometimes the body keeps the truth of joy in a closet," he told her once as the sun sliced through the greenhouse glass at an impossible angle. "It waits for someone to leave the door open." He recreated the studio for her, not the sterile physical therapy studio that smelled of disinfectant, but the studio of her heart, a mirrored wall, a worn bar, a playlist of the pieces she had once inhabited, ribbons of scent that traced back to costume rooms and powdered backstage air. He didn't set goals in numbers. He set scenes, a mirrored wall catching the afternoon light, bar warm from hands that had once rehearsed the same phrase 1,000 times. And then they began to try. First, sensation. The memory of plantar flexion, the idea of balance. Then small movements under Adam's steady hands. He didn't overpromise. "I won't promise you walking," he said. "I can promise I'll stand with you while you try." The first time she rose and held his wrists, her legs shook with a protest so loud only she could hear it. She managed 3 seconds. She wept into Adam's shirt not because of the physical strain, but because the world rearranged itself into possibility. Charles watched from a distance at first, skeptical, protective, proud in a way that had seldom touched vulnerability. He had spent fortunes. He had contracted science and power and stillness. And now a man in jeans had brought what money could not buy, a scaffold for a heart to claim courage again. "Why him?" Charles demanded one afternoon. Voice clipped by sleepless nights and the rawness of a father who had once solved everything with a signature. "What makes you think you can fix her?" Adam didn't flare. He met Charles's gaze with quiet, that unpeeled anger. "I don't think I can fix anything," he said. "I think I can remind her of something she already knows," was the truth. Progress was jagged. There were days of backward steps, tears, panic, phantom pains that stole weeks of confidence. There were days of small, merciless victories. A bend of a knee, the recovery of balance, the gasp when a routine pushed memory into muscle. Then came an evening saturated with golden light, the kind that paints everything as if forgiveness has a color. The field beyond the cabins was dusted with mist, and Adam's son chased invisible beasts while Emily sat on a blanket, legs tucked beneath her. Adam's hand fell into hers like a practiced cadence. "Walk with me," he said softly. She rose, and for a moment the air itself watched. Step 1, uncertain. Step 2, trembling. Step 3, steadier. 4 or 5 unassisted. Her son's laughter burst across the field like a chorus. Charles wept openly, unraveling in the open air of a place that had taught them how to breathe again. Emily's face wet with tears, fierce with a dawning stubbornness, turned toward Adam. She held herself like a woman who had carried a long weight, and finally set it down to see what was left of her hands. Later, when the sun had passed behind the ridge and their shadows stitched long and thin, Emily sat in the grass and spoke, the words slipping like tokens into a jar. "You didn't promise miracles," she said to Adam. "You promised not to leave." "That was the plan," he replied, smiling. "And sometimes that's the biggest thing." They didn't pretend the road was finished. There would be therapy appointments, small regressions, hard nights. But the shape of their lives had shifted. Where there had been a verdict written in sterile charts, there was now a narrative being relearned, one of ordinary tenderness, of a single dad who taught a girl who'd once ruled stages how to stand again, and of a father who learned how to loosen his grip and let something healing enter. The mountain wind moved through the field like a slow exhale. Somewhere in the retreat, a piano played the ghost of a melody Emily had loved. She closed her eyes and let it fill the space that had been carved away. For the first time in half a year, she believed in a tomorrow that hadn't been bought or engineered, one that had been earned by being seen. And if you ever find yourself thinking that small, ordinary.